Get in.
Why? What are you doing here?
Mom said you'd pay Mom bucks if I drove you home from school.
It's about time, little bro, that you learn the secrets to an easy life.
I recently watched the second film in one of my favorite movie series, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. There are a lot of reasons as to why me and so many people love these films, but there's one underlying theme, an important lesson that will be of great use to you to learn, and would have been of great use to me as well had I learned it sooner in life. So if that's of interest to you, then stay tuned. This channel exists to encourage you to be your best self through lessons that are primarily rooted in biblical and stoic principles. The plot of the film Rodrick Rules has mostly to do with Greg and his friendship with his older brother Rodrick. To quickly explain, they start off with not that great a connection at the beginning of the film, eventually forming a greater bond over a party they had had and a lie they had told their parents surrounding the party. Their friendship then takes a drastic hit as the truth finally comes out, and both Rodrick and Greg are then made to stay at their grandpa's retirement home for a few days. Rodrick also being forbidden from playing with his band in the talent show.
We're also not allowing you to perform in the talent show.
What? No.
Come the near end of the film, and their friendship takes yet another turn. Do watch the whole movie for some more context, I suppose. But throughout the film, Rodrick displays some fascinating qualities that are certainly taken advantage of by him in one way or another. Rodrick is punctual, at least he proves that he can be. Once Mrs. Heffley began with the mom bucks charade, Rodrick was quick to be punctual about using his van to pick Greg up from school. All it took was the proper motivation, the fact that he was going to get paid for it. And perhaps that's what you need as well. Maybe it's a matter of the risk to reward ratio that stops you from being all that you could be and putting all your effort in. And I get that, especially in regards to like a basic 9-to-5 job. In terms of the pay for the amount of hours worked, it can be demoralizing. I mean, that definitely, I've been there. But even within that, you can consider what you're going to use your money for, like with what Rodrick was doing. I'm sure he didn't care to be at Greg's school right on time to pick him up, let alone, I was going to say maybe he didn't want to drive him. Maybe there is some fun in that because they got to get tossed around the whole van. But in any case, he had the proper motivation. He was going to get some cash for it that he was going to use for band equipment or what have you. So again, maybe you just need the proper motivation. And in that case, if you need some motivation, your entire bloodline and ancestry has led to you. So now this is your turn. It's your turn to make something of yourself. So you got this. Now just go and do it. Rodrick also is a risk taker. He has that quality. And talk about the drive home from picking up Greg. He risked some major traffic tickets, if not worse. I by no means am condoning this type of driving, if that even has to be said. But the point is that the psychology and attitude within Rodrick aren't all inherently bad, but are rather useful qualities when used for good and in its proper context. Rodrick also can be elaborate and smart.
It's a really nice try, Greggy. But whatever you thought, I already thinked it.
I mean, it's clear, even from the first movie's intro, that Rodrick has that capacity for elaborate thinking, planning, and executing, both when it comes to picking on Greg, but also in regards to his band. I mean, not everyone could even be a part of, or let alone form their own band, not to mention getting into a talent show. He also managed to sneak a candy bar onto Greg's seat without him noticing. I still don't know how he did that. But again, this is an example of Rodrick using his wit for anything but good. But the point is, he has the capacity for this intelligent thinking. And he was pretty intentional about telling Greg about the musical chairs, saying, okay, go down to the basement because, we're going to play musical chairs. It comes back when you hit high school. It's a pretty good line, pretty good story, and Greg bought it. He said all that just to get him to go down to the basement so he could lock him in. Yeah, rude, right? But it's certainly smart. You can't argue against that. Well, I hope that you've already noticed the recurring theme here. There are certain amoral qualities that Rodrick possesses. As I've mentioned, he's proven that he has the capacity to be punctual, to take risks. Is that, risks? It's kind of an awkward word to say. But in any case, he's able to plan ahead for elaborate plans and do so much more that we'll get into in a second. All of these qualities that are neither good or bad inherently on their own. But what does he do with these useful qualities? He mostly doesn't use them for good. It's kind of like being able to play an instrument. That's not inherently a moral good or bad, but it is very useful, and you can use it for good. An example of that would be using your musical ability to play for a church or to make some uplifting music or just meaningful music. Or you could use it for what I would argue is, even if not bad, it's just not the most good. It's kind of like degenerate music. You could make that. I guess there's a time for shallow music, but there are certainly songs that the world would be better off not if they didn't exist, because they're promoting some bad stuff, whether it's some bad actions or taking some stuff that you shouldn't, or doing things. You know what kind of music I'm talking about. The lesson then is to realize the fact that you too have the capacity to take advantage of useful qualities that you possess.
Myth.
What?
And by the way,
Me?
Yes, there are.
So do take advantage of them by using them for good. Rodrick also is socially adequate enough, at least. Perhaps he's not the most articulate person, or whatever way you'd want to define that, but he managed to fill his whole house with, I guess, a ton of people he knew, or at least that were in his contact list. And clearly all these people were down to party with him, so socially adequate enough, as I said. And he proved that he can work well with others. He was able to do a great job of cleaning up the house with Greg after the party, even a bit too well, to the extent that they added some pretzel crumbs on the floor to make it not as perfect. He's able to be a recruiter of sorts. He was able to get Bill into his band just like that. Now, perhaps the pot roast had something to do with it.
All right, Bill, I think we should...
Whoa. Do I smell pot roast?
Kind of roped him in with the dinner, but in any case, it still worked. Rodrick works smarter, not harder. He bought a ton of mom bucks from the store. Now, this was obviously deceitful and therefore wrong, but it isn't inherently wrong to be intelligent, as long as you're intelligent but also virtuous. As it says in this quote here, intelligence without character is a dangerous thing, and that's certainly true. Now, you could argue that Rodrick doesn't care much to work smarter, not harder. He's just lazy. And I could see that being the case, but perhaps it is the case that the quality of wanting to work smarter in and of itself it is amoral, rather. Like, it's not a necessarily moral good or bad, but the moral bad is when it turns into simply laziness, I suppose. Rodrick has advice to give, albeit not very good advice, but he has the capacity and care enough to give someone tips that he thinks will help them.
Rule number 1, don't be good at something you don't want to do.
That was one of his little tidbits of advice. Again, like I said, perhaps not the best advice, but the point being, he's telling someone something that he thinks will help them. Rodrick is also thoughtful. He took Greg out after learning of his misfortune at school. Once again, they got up to some degeneracy in large part, but the heart was at least almost in the right place. Rodrick is also forgiving. He forgave Greg and gave him the embarrassing tape after he had made a deal with their mom in order for Rodrick to be able to play in the talent show. Some people would have still been stubborn about the whole scenario. Again, just watch the movie for the full context. But again, even if there's reconciliation and someone apologizes and everything is made right, there are still those that will remain stubborn about it, unfortunately. But Rodrick didn't do that. He is, again, forgiving. Now, let me set the record straight. I'd say Rodrick does rule, because by the end of the movie, he began to use his qualities and personality for good, in large part. I just didn't want anyone to think that this video was primarily to ridicule Rodrick, because again, I just hope it was clear that I was pointing out that he has amoral qualities that he mostly was using not for good, but then by the end used it for good. So in that case, Rodrick rules. So then, what are you putting your efforts towards? I'm sure you're competent in many aspects and ways. Are you using your abilities for the greatest good? It's an important question, not just because your efforts could be used for the detriment of the world, which is obviously bad, But you could also just waste your efforts, your energy, brain points, whatever rows your boat. I mean, whatever you want to call it. It's so easy to waste our efforts and time.
What you been doing?
Absolutely nothing.
And on that note, I want to be clear in saying downtime is important. And having a largely inconsequential but fun hobby or multiple hobbies is also necessary. But I suppose my word of advice would be to not burn yourself out on the less important things here. Don't waste your efforts on those things at the expense of the more important tasks that you know you should do. For example, instead of using your intelligence to hatch an elaborate plan to ruin someone's day, or at least potentially, devise an elaborate plan to make their day. Rather than simply keeping to yourself in any public space, but then using all your energy to party constantly, make connections with people you see at the store, the park, wherever you go. Again, the idea being to realize the qualities you have that you're naturally prone to or are good at, but also acknowledge that you have the capacity for any good quality. You know, you might argue, I'm not empathetic. I don't care very much about others. Well, it's good that you're able to acknowledge that that's kind of a natural, well, I don't want to say natural, but that's kind of the standpoint you're at right now. Acknowledging that, practice caring about others. So you have the capacity for any good quality, but again, any quality you do have, whether it's intelligence or being punctual or wanting to help people out by giving advice, whatever it is, just use it for the greatest good. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Doing wickedness is like sport to a fool, and so is wisdom to a person of understanding. So those are just a few verses to kind of contrast some things here, and let it be said of you that you identify, or not only identify, but you are more recognizable as the good, what it says is wise to do, and what the word says you ought to do. Well, I hope that this all makes sense, and I sincerely hope that it helps you in some way. So apply it today and wherever and whenever applicable. Also, check out my previous video I made about Spider-Man and the unfortunate reality of the idea of Peter choosing to be Spider-Man, and how it's rather like, I don't want to give away the whole thing, the whole video, but it's another important lesson, if I can say so myself, and I do. So check it out if you're interested. I also have a ton of new exclusive content that I'm working on for members to watch, so if you want to see the exclusive videos as well as any of my new videos early, you'll get to see them first, and you just want to support the channel, the message, then do consider joining. Thank you so much for watching. I truly do appreciate it. Remember to treat others the way that you want to be treated, and to love God and love your neighbor, and therefore you will continue to be your best self. Again, thank you for watching, and as always, it's an honor.